A pretty fun and rather quick thing to do with those grain dynamics that we talked about last time is actually slicing them. And this setup is as straightforward as it gets. So in our case, let's just use a box here for our volume that we're going to slice and maybe make it 3 by 1 by 1 units, like so. Then directly drop down a vellum configure grain node, and we're going to check create points from volume. Let's just get rid of that grid here, and those are quite regular and a bit big, so I'll decrease the grain size to say 0.05, and what I could do is actually jitter those points, which takes a bit of time but breaks up this regular grid here. In our case we could work with both configurations, however I usually like to jitter those point positions as this can get rid of some simulation artifacts. Next, we're going to drop down our vellum glue constraint, like last time, which we set up to configure our soft body-ish grains. So we'll set our group type to points and our target group to points as well. Then add a null, which we're going to use to display the constraints only. And then in the vellum glue sub, we'll increase the constraints per point to 10 in this case. And maybe increase the stretch stiffness to 1000, like so. Next, we'll attach a vellum solver. So, pretty standard setup until now. Let's highlight the vellum solver and increase our substeps to 5, our constraint iterations. Let's decrease that to 10, and let's use a ground plane, which will move down to say minus 0.6. Let's just run the simulation so far. And yeah, that's behaving as expected. Alright, let's reset this and kind of build our knife, so to speak. For that, I'll use a circle, which I'll set to be a polygon with only 4 divisions. Let's highlight this here. And I want to have this, yes, on the XY plane, but also scale down this radius here to make this kind of sharp prism. Let's extrude this using a poly extrude. And let's just extrude this maybe 3 units and check output back. Let's ghost this and highlight our solver again. So let's animate this. When I scrub on my simulated timeline, I can see my blob, my soft body mass here comes to rest at about 24 to 32. So what I want to do is using a transform, which I'll drop underneath the poly extrude and wire that in. Using that transform, I want to move my slicer geometry here, center, and well above my soft body mass here, maybe like this. Next, on frame 24, let's set a keyframe for the Y translation by alt-clicking in here. And then on frame, say 48, let's move this all the way through this soft body mass and keyframe that again. We could already simulate this by just wiring in our animated geometry into our collider input here in the vellum constraints node. However, and let's, for example, simulate this, and we'll see what comes out of that. So here's my soft body. Let's just save this before we hit sim and run this. And although this slicer went through my soft body, the soft body somehow was not really impressed by that and just fused together again. That is because the constraints did not break when the slicer went through it. So the secret to slicing your soft body here is in the vellum glue, scrolling down here, and checking breaking. So now we can dial in a stretch stress threshold, which once it's crossed will tell the individual constraints to break, to basically disable themselves. And this is a bit tricky to dial in, so you're gonna have to do a few test runs, a few test simulations, to set up your constraints in a way so that they don't break prematurely, but just when the slicer goes through the whole object. Let's try this default setup here. And as you can see, that still needs a bit of tweaking, so I will fast forward through this process. And after a quick trial and error, setting the breaking threshold to 0.4 and the breaking threshold stress type to stretch ratio, that yielded decent results. So here's what it simulated. We can take that and continue slicing our soft bodies now into different parts. And to actually render this, well, in this case, as we're changing topology here, creating decent geometry with standard tools is a bit more involved, so I'll just take a shortcut here and simply use the VDB from particles, and we'll turn those individual grains here into a VDB. Just had to set my voxel size to the right value, which in this case was 0.005, which should be a fraction, so at least twice as small as my grain size. In this case, it's 10 times as small. So basically each of my grains has 10 voxels in diameter now. What I can do now is just smooth out this VDB using the smooth SDF, just to fuse together those individual points, setting the filter voxel radius to maybe 2, And actually, before we smooth it, maybe expand the individual spheres a bit by using a reshape SDF node set to dilate, and let's dilate it 1 voxel. So yeah, I expanded those individual points here a bit and then smooth them. And I think they can actually be smoothed a bit further. So let's increase the smoothing iterations to say 8. And now what I could do for rendering is convert that back into a polygon using the convert VDB node here, which allows me to just convert my SDF into polygons here like that, which is a really high density mesh, and I could increase the adaptivity value here a bit to get a rather lower res version of that mesh, which I can then cache either using the cache node or the file cache before rendering it out. And that's the quick, dirty, easy, and really fun way to actually slice soft bodies. So when it occurred to me for the first time that this might work, and it actually worked, I couldn't stop giggling and just played around basically half a day with slicing up different stuff in different geometry. So I encourage you to do the same and actually send us a few links to the renders you do. Because as always, we are very intrigued to see what you guys cook up. So with that in mind, have fun guys, and until next time, it's cheers and goodbye.